Hi, sir. How are you? I am the boss. I do get to vote. Yes. Robert's Rule of Order says the mayor pro tem can vote. Yep. Yes, sir.
At some point, I will miss. I will do something.
All right, Kaylin, are we ready yet?
Wow. Saving up.
Pretty much.
You ready? You're so far away.
I know, it looks like a long distance.
All right, Jim, we're gonna get started.
Say it again.
That's why you have. He does.
Oh,
Good meeting
wow.
tonight.
She's a legal
But
impediment.
that's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, it is 6:02. We're gonna call the meeting to order. So tonight is the city council work session and regular meeting, Thursday, April 21st, 2022, 6:02 PM. Kaylin, would you call the roll, please?
Yeah. Councilmember Lester.
Here.
Baker. I keep on. Cool.
Here,
Livingston.
Here. And I think you have to call Reva's name even
Do I
though
still
she's,
call him?
yes.
Okay. Reva. And Mayor Phillips.
All right. Okay, so first thing on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you join me. Please rise and join.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Would anyone like to move any of the consent agenda items to the regular agenda? All right, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
motion. Second.
All right, we have a motion from Cool, second by Lester. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. All right, the agenda is approved. So now we have a dedicated work session. This is a session dedicated for the mayor and council, specifically to work on certain issues. This is expected to last an hour, and then we'll swing into the regular council meeting when this work session ends. So the first thing on the agenda is disturbing the peace. A couple months ago, we had a resident come to address city council about construction noise. And so Chief Staples did some work and has some information. So Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, maybe I have it.
Right? You have it, you're just not sure you're gonna
You'll
share
just tell
it.
me to advance them.
Okay, thank you for having me. Based on the information provided by the citizen a couple months ago, we as staff have talked about our noise ordinance enforcement and our noise ordinance in particular. And I can say that I have a seven slide PowerPoint in reference to all this. The first slide says noise.
And when you go through it shortly, it'll pop up on their screen. It's just worth trying to get these to go.
There you go.
Oh, there we are. So noise complaints to city staff and generally the police department come in three different areas. Usually they're loud music or parties, or just loud noises from a neighbor, construction noise, and then loud vehicles. Those are the three main categories of noise complaints that the police department receives. In 2022, we've received 12 noise complaints. 12 noise complaints at the police department. They've broken down 9 loud music was found in. 5 of those 9 were in apartments, from one apartment to the next. 2 of them were construction noise issues, One of them was an apartment scenario where one person was banging a hammer to hang a picture and doing crafting, which caused that person to bang on the table. And then the other one was a construction area for a new neighborhood. The construction company parks their construction vehicles just near a established residence. We worked with the resident and those construction people previously. The company knows not to start until 7, but the workers showed up prior to 7. And we got a call at like 6:30 that construction workers were there and that they might start before 7. And then the last one was loud public address system from the high school. That is a recurring thing during football events and events at the stadium. We get residents complaining of the level of the noise so that they can hear it. So those are what we've experienced so far in 2022. That is not unusual if we had expanded it out to a longer period of time. In Norwalk, our code for noise falls under 40-03, which is disorderly conduct. It's interesting that our noise code is our noise section is in the same code section as disorderly conduct, along with fighting, abusive language, disrupting the lawful assembly, false report of catastrophe, and disrespecting the flag. From the placement of the code, I have considered that the intent of the noise prohibition in Norwalk is that it is tantamount to disorderly conduct. There are also 2 other sections in our code preventing making loud noises that would interrupt a funeral and loud truck noise. This is our noise code. It's section 2 of the disorderly conduct code. Make loud and raucous noise in the vicinity of a residence or public building which causes unreasonable distress to the occupants thereof. I read it loud and raucous and unreasonable because that's the words that make this code enforceable without an unreasonable distress. If it's reasonable distress, then it's not a violation. If it's not loud or raucous, it's not a violation. So a question that we need to discuss or consider is construction noise disorderly by nature? If it's not, then I don't believe construction noise is a violation of the code, even if it was loud and raucous, because it's not disorderly. But that's for legal minds greater than mine. Noise enforcement. So when we get a noise call, these are the kind of things that we think about. The police department, as well as community development and building official. Since we're dealing with unreasonable distress, we have to consider a reasonable person standard. What would a reasonable person think about the level of about the noise that's being complained about? What is reasonable to cleanse? Depends on a number of factors. Could be anything, time of day, type of noise, circumstances that's being distressed. Depends on circumstances. What is the type of noise that's working on your car versus working on your race car? As a patrol officer early in my career, there were a number of people that had a race car in their garage and they liked to work on it with their buddies until 2 o'clock in the morning while they drank beer, which was fine until they started it, but because it didn't have an engine or a muffler, it was very loud. We got calls on it all the time. Here in Norwalk, there is at least one race car that I can get from my house. I believe it's housed over at Red Place, and they work on it on the weekends, but not late at night. But you get the point that if it's illegal to work on your car because it's making too much noise, is that your own personal car or is it your race car? And when we go to enforce, we try to get voluntary compliance. This is what an officer would typically do if they got a loud music or a loud noise from the neighbor call. We would respond, we'd speak to whoever reported it. We'd address the situation with the person causing the problem. We provide remedies to lessen the impact in the code. And also talk about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. As a general rule, we have operated since my time in Norwalk that 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. noises within that time frame are considered reasonable. and noises outside that time frame are considered unreasonable. That's not a bright line rule, that's just a general guideline that we go by. We typically and regularly talk to people who want to have a party or want to have a band outside about strategies to limit the impact on neighbors and limit the potential to get complained on. And those things are paying attention to wind direction, setting up the stage so that the wind blows the noise away from neighbors, keeping the volume of the bass level low. People complain about the thump versus the level of the noise. Notifying the neighbors, inviting the neighbors, and then put a clock as a cutoff time. Construction noise, same thing. The officer goes, talks to whoever they can find to talk to, and then we community development so they can address it with the construction company. One issue with construction noise is what is construction noise and who is making it. If I am cutting a board with a circular saw, am I making construction noise? Is a question we would have to debate. That sounds awesome. Yep. So that's what I put together. That's the history of noises so far this year and how we address them. Oh, one other thing. Today and over the course of the last months, we have talked with community development. Today I went and spoke to them at length about construction noise. And there was an idea previously about putting on our building permits a notation that MPN is generally considered a good time frame to do construction noise, to do construction, so that the person with the permit would have to somehow firmly acknowledge that they've been told that that's what we consider reasonable. Question?
That what you're gonna do? Or you're just in the
They said that
discussion?
they can do that.
Yep, we are gonna add that to our permits so that it, again, just like Greg said, it's notated on there, so when somebody pulls a permit, they've got a better idea of when they should be operating their equipment. I think can be fuzzy at times with summer hours and people wanting to get out there a little bit earlier. So 7 a.m. might not be a hard line, it's more of a guideline, so.
You're concerned though that that type of noise doesn't neatly fit within that ordinance you have.
I personally don't believe that construction noise is disorderly by nature. Because of that, I personally don't believe that it fits into our noise code.
So that's different than disorderly per se.
So a loud party, in my opinion, is disorderly conduct. And that's the title of it. And it's driving a bulldozer at 6:30 in the morning because it's going to be 100 degrees at 4 p.m. Is that disorderly? In my opinion, it's not. And because it's not, in my opinion, it doesn't fit in that code. That's just my interpretation of the way it's laid out. I don't know, the attorney might have a different opinion.
When you're dealing with a reasonable person standard, I think probably be a reasonable standard for people similarly situated under the same circumstances. And it's a bunch of gray areas what it is. So, absolutely, I think an effective criminal defendant, defense attorney that got a hold of that ordinance and they're in front of a trial, I'd probably be successful some of the times on that defense.
And I use an example for that as in years past, we had a young man who was riding a motorcycle on his own property without a muffler. The noise was certainly loud. It might have been raucous, depending on your definition, and it was certainly causing unreasonable distress. There was no doubt about that. But because it was riding a motorcycle on private property, in a non-disorderly manner, I didn't feel like it fit the noise code. And the attorney agreed, and we did not charge him with violating the noise ordinance. We went around nuisance. I'm saying that I think as a person in charge of enforcement, I think having a gray area, having a code like we have that uses a reasonable man standard is reasonable person standard, excuse me, reasonable person standard is appropriate. And if we wanted to create a construction noise ordinance in a reasonable person standard, I think that might make sense. However, no matter what we do, we're still always going to try for voluntary compliance, which has worked for the most part. I can't think of anybody that we've had to tell more than twice. And usually it's a construction firm that's got multiple subcontractors, and a new sub comes in and doesn't know, and we have to go tell them twice. But on the third time, there's never a third. So our current situation works. Works for the police department, works for community development. I think we can make it a little better in the construction area by making the alteration to the building permit that we've discussed. So that's I think we're good the way we are, but if council wants to consider a construction noise ordinance, I think we can figure out how to, it'd be difficult because I don't know how we define construction noise.
Well, you bring this at a good time, because we're about to hear a bunch of noise.
Yes, it's that time of year, isn't it?
I don't know, the only other thing I would think of maybe is to address it in a non-criminal way. Something maybe in regards to the regulations or the ordinances that apply toward construction and the issuance of permits. So it's not in the criminal area. Because it seems more like an administrative thing to me. Because the people aren't going out and willfully tearing something up or, I agree with the chief. It's kind of inappropriate anyway to look at it under that. So what would you prefer to see happen?
I think personally that we are addressing the citizens' complaints when they happen in an effective manner, and that creating a code is creating a code for something where we don't need.
I would agree with that.
You'd like to work your way through this season and see how you guys feel about it at the end.
Absolutely. I think I don't anticipate this being any different than any other year. And it's usually a neighborhood, and it's usually at the very beginning of the neighborhood when they're moving dirt, is when we get the calls. And knowing that, adjusting the building permit, I think we can address that stuff, those potential complaints before they start, because we know when the neighborhood's going, when the dirt movers are going to show up.
The other thing that we'll do, building permit will capture one set of people that build houses. The other thing that we do, and usually what the construction point usually ends up being more on the developer side where they're doing the mass grading of a site. So we'll do some communication in our pre-app meetings about, hey, try to be reasonable with when your people are out there working. And that's how we've compelled compliance with it is, I don't necessarily even call the contractor up. I call the developer up and I say, you need to get on your contractors and have them, understand they're working in a neighborhood and be a little more responsive to the people around them. And, we don't get follow-up complaints. So, we also don't go out there at 5:30 to see if they're there or not, but you just kind of assume that when you're not getting the follow-up complaints that it's being addressed. And our developers, in general, they're very good about wanting to do that because they want to keep the relationship with the city so they can keep having a good working relationship with us. So
You might add to them too, when you're talking with them like that. You might say, the city really wouldn't like to have to pass an ordinance that deals with that.
yeah, true.
Because that might.
I really don't want to enforce it either.
That might
Yeah.
not be.
And the noise really.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Brian.
You can hear me. That's a positive. I've had a lot of trouble getting on. One thing you might have gone over it already. The construction isn't bad. I live in an area of massive construction right now. Some of the crews' radios are, it's not a construction, but boy, they have that radio cranked beyond belief, and you can hear that 2 blocks away. It would be, that's one of those I think you drive by and mention it and move on. I think construction noise should not be considered. It's temporary, the most a couple months. I know with large developments, it can seem like a year, 2 years, but It's a temporary necessity. I know when they built my house, it was noisy and luckily people put up with it.
So loud music at a construction site would fall, in my opinion, under the disorderly conduct noise code. And the police can and should address it. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you would have to go with, is it causing unreasonable distress? If you can hear it 2 blocks away, I'd say that that would be unreasonable. So
Yeah. Good.
yes, we should address those when the complaints come in. I'm sure the officers will.
Any other comments or questions or?
Nope, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will move on to the regular city council meeting and start with presentations. So we're going to introduce our new fire inspector, Chief Porter. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to introduce Jeremy Cross. He's our new fire inspector. He started with us a couple weeks ago. He's been doing a really nice job with working with Luke Ferris and with Tony. I'm gonna let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Jeremy Cross, married, got a couple of children. We reside just outside of Norwalk. I've been in the fire industry for a little over 15 years and very excited to be here and be part of Norwalk's team.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we don't have a full complement of staff to welcome you, but we're glad you're here.
Yeah, welcome to the club. You're welcome.
All right, and the next presentation is the City of Norwalk Wage Study and Survey with our 6585 consultant and Carrie Keith. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
You've put a lot of work into this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. So for those who are in attendance, my name is, or sorry, those who are in attendance but don't know me, my name is Carrie Keaton. I'm the HR director for the City of Norwalk. To begin with, I want to recognize and thank Mayor Phillips and council for the dedication that you've shown to city staff. You demonstrate this dedication by investing in your staff. You listen to the staff and heard that we need to consider metro community wages when determining Norwalk's appropriate wage ranges. You supported the hiring of 6585 Consulting to conduct the comprehensive compensation study and for guidance. I thank you, your staff thanks you.
Yeah, here. It's the one I think, so there you go. Got it.
Sorry, I've never used one of these clickers before. So the purpose of the compensation study is twofold. One is looking at overall compensation, available benefits, work satisfaction, and organizational culture, how the employees feel that the city is doing, and more importantly, what the city can improve upon, what we can do better. The second purpose of the study was to review the city's wages to ensure that we are competitive with metro communities and that we are appropriately paying our employees for the work that they perform. Tonight's presentation is simply that, a chance to provide the council with the results and what staff plan to do with the information. There's no action item on the agenda tonight in regards to the study or implementation of the results. Our expectation tonight is that council will provide feedback, particularly on the wage component of the presentation. Obviously, you notice Mayor Phillips and Councilmember Riva are absent tonight, but they are a part of our admin policy work group, so they have heard this presentation and have already provided feedback to myself and Luke. Just to give a quick background, the city entered into an agreement with 6585 Consulting for the project back in December. And then the employee survey was conducted in late January, and Meredith had the results ready for us by early March. Myself, Luke, and Meredith have had several meetings to discuss the results and to strategize on how to move forward. Meredith has been incredible through this process. She's brought to the table a lot of knowledge, has been incredibly helpful. Meredith will be covering the employee survey portion of the presentation. And then Meredith, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and telling a little bit about 6585.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you all very much for having me here tonight. I know some of you, but others are new faces to me. So thank you again for investing in the city of Norwalk. I think that for me as technically a resident. I'm technically West Des Moines, but my kids are in Norwalk school, so we're right on that kind of no man's land. But we are very proud to be part of Norwalk. We have bumper stickers and the whole 9 yards, all the apparel. So I'm really proud then to be able to help work with you all on this. So what we did in designing the survey was really figure out where are we now and where do we want to go. So in general, I'll back up, talk about 6585 Consulting. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I was so excited for results. So 6585 Consulting, we specialize in all things people. So all things human resources. So whether that is things like strategic planning or things like coaching, training, facilitation. We've been doing a lot of compensation and cultural surveys right now, really getting a pulse on where the workforce is, because in a lot of places and spaces, the workplace hasn't really changed, but the workforce has. And so we're trying to help organizations of all different sizes get up to speed with where maybe they need to be and or where their employees want them to be. So I commend you all for taking the opportunity to really listen to the employees and hearing where they're at and where they want to go. Oh, very skip. Okay. All right. So I'll jump in regardless of slide. So when we were designing the survey, we wanted to really talk and touch these subjects: compensation, salary, culture, leadership, team dynamics, individual, like job specific, and then also development opportunities. So things like, do we have the tools and resources we need, and or do we have training and those sorts of things that we need for the future? What was really great, I think, and really a testament to your workforce, is we had 74 responses. So of that, we were able to really pull some great information, both qualitatively and quantitatively. So we found out we were doing really great, especially in the category of culture. Culture was a real high point for us in terms of the feedback that we got back from the city of Norwalk. People felt that the relationships that Norwalk has with the community are very strong. They're proud of those relationships. They're proud to be a part of the city. They really appreciate that Norwalk continues to strive for excellence. They are appreciative for the city development and want to see that continue. Now, we wish there, of course, were only fabulous things, but that wouldn't be always realistic. So with that, we were also given a great opportunity to hear direct feedback. So what we did is look at patterns, trends, and themes. So if there were maybe one or two comments, those were kind of the outliers. Instead, we looked at things that we heard over and over. So in that, we found that there's some great opportunities for us to be a little bit more successful in the category of communication. As we all know, nobody ever says, oh gosh, we overly communicate or we communicate too much. So we have some great options and ways that we can continue to make sure people feel maybe less siloed and that we can build those communication bridges. With that, we also, of course, heard time and time again, compensation is not where it needs to be, which is why we are here today. So people, our employees gave feedback that said, you know, the last compensation study, while gave insight, was not really comparable of metro cities. We aren't really interested maybe in, let's say, going to Waverly, so that's not ideally a comparable. So let's look at the West Des Moines, let's look at the Urbandales, the Ankeneys, the metro cities, and really see what they're doing. So we were able to, of course, run with that right away and do that and get them some comps. So that was excellent. And it's definitely what they were saying is that we need to make some changes in compensation. The other thing we heard feedback on is that people, the employees right now are really hungry for leadership training and development opportunities. And so Luke, Carrie, and I have been able to brainstorm right off the bat ways that we can really listen to the employees and make sure that we are addressing their concerns and or what they're asking for information. So great start in terms of where the employees want to go and where we would like to help get them to. So with that, I think it's on to Luke. Oh, Carrie,
I'm gonna
just
take
kidding.
over
I
for a
lied.
minute. So in regards to the employee survey, so we collectively, the leadership team of the city, that we're going to take into consideration the employees' feedback and develop strategies to address the areas that Meredith mentioned and a few others. A big focus will be on that improvement of communication. And even since meeting with Meredith, we've had a couple chances to do that. One, Holly with Economic Development presented to the Public Works employees about some development projects and just happenings around town, kind of keeping them in the loop. And then second, even just about this wage study, Luke sent out a brief video to staff about the wage study and upcoming implementation. So we're already trying to be more communicative with our employees. And then before we jump into the wage study portion of the presentation, I just want to remind you again, we're not asking council to take any action tonight or approve any wages. We're going to walk you through the wage comparison and the methodology that we have applied to right size our salary matrix with metro communities. What we need is your critical thinking. Luke is going to present the methodology that we adopted to guide setting these wage ranges, and we look forward to your feedback. And what we really want to know is if you're on board with this methodology. So Luke.
Should we ask questions as it's coming up, or should we wait till the end, or what would you prefer?
Anytime, Brian.
I'm just curious of what a corporate culture is in a city, an example of that, or how that would be displayed.
Yeah, absolutely. So that has to do with things like, do we have pride? Do we have trust? Really the things that, I think that sometimes in corporate culture, which we work with corporate organizations, but of course we work with cities, a lot of cities, city of Indianola, for example, also Des Moines Airport Authority is one of our clients as well. So we work with a wide variety in general. And what we are finding out is that people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. So part of that is belonging and making sure that people feel a part of that team and that there's a cohesive, that there's kind of this cohesive thing that everybody's working towards and we're all kind of rowing in the same direction. And so I think that culture in cities is defined as the employees define it. And so when we look at these studies, the fact that people are satisfied with the work environment, the fact that people say that the city has a good reputation, or that they would even be willing to refer a friend or a family member to the city, is part of that culture. And so we've talked a little bit more about how we can do that, kind of even take that further. But the fact that just in general that people are saying that they are proud, that's a very good start to building that culture and that DNA. But sounds like there is definitely some additional steps that we can be taking to even make that progress further. Does that help answer your question?
Yes.
Any other questions for me or Carrie or Luke?
All right. Well, Brian, David being online, please, anybody here interrupt. I feel like the presentations go a lot better when we're answering questions along the way. So I'll get started talking about the wage range comparison. This has been great. Carrie and Meredith are a good team to work with. I feel like I'm more the numbers guy down in the weeds. So you got their side of it. Now you're going to get all the charts and graphs, which I'm sure everybody's excited about. Comprehensive wage range. So what we did, as Meredith mentioned, we had a little bit of negative feedback from, I call it negative, from our staff saying, are we really comparing ourselves to the right communities? So these are the communities that were selected. And most notably, the way that I can explain it is these are the communities that we have to compete with for our staff. Now, are there others? Certainly, but these are the primary cities that we have to compete with. Once we selected those communities, we wanted to make sure that we identified how to best balance those wage comparisons. One thing I want to note right up front very quickly, and this was a bit of an aha moment for Carrie and I, when Meredith brought up that when you do wage comparisons, it may not be the best to specifically compare current wages. Instead, you should be looking at the max of any wage range from any of these communities. When I compare myself to a city manager in another community, we might have different years of experience. There may be other factors involved that it's hard to compare those two salaries. But if we look at the max and the wage range. So the numbers that you will be seeing throughout this are really a focus on that max wage range or that upper end.
I have a question, Luke, before you go too much further. On the communities that were selected, some of those communities are considerably larger than us, and their tax base is considerably different than ours. And I don't know, you want to address
I'd-
why
you-
they're there? Or-
You couldn't have said better what we had run through our minds as well. In fact, those two issues that you just brought up are the leading two things that we use as the initial guide. So it's a good introduction, Ed. Thank you. First of all, are they larger? Yes. Population was a basis that we wanted to use for comparison. Norwalk has a smaller population than most of those metro communities. It doesn't mean we don't compete with them. Valuation. Certainly, that is a factor. And our valuation, because we're so heavy residential, elected officials have heard me say this so many times. Some of our unions and negotiations have heard me say this so many times. Our valuation is comparatively lower because we are so heavily residential. As you know, residential is about 50 cents on the dollar compared to commercial. That valuation is really our ability to pay. That's our main cash register that we come in, that we then use those dollars to pay our staff. So those were the first two that really came up, and we did a number of analysis, and you'll see this when I jump into the Excel file. But it seemed like there was something missing. And as we thought through it, the third factor that we really wanted to identify was current growth. This is where Norwalk far outpaces some of these other larger communities, because our phase of growth is much more aggressive than those comparison communities. A little quote there, it's we need to be competitive, but we have to balance that field. So we're going to be going through the methodology we used to show you how we balanced all that out. So I've got a few graphs here, and these are going to show the population, valuation, and growth. So the first one, you'll see the arrow in case you can't read at the bottom. It's kind of small print. The arrow shows you where Norwalk falls visually compared to all the other communities. To the far right on each one of these graphs is the average. So the smallest population would be Pleasant Hill, around 10,000, with the largest being West Des Moines at about 69,000. And these are based on the 2020 census. Taxable valuation. This is where Norwalk trails the pack, the lowest. So we're around 600 million for taxable value, where West Des Moines is in the neighborhood of about 6.25 billion for taxable value. Those data centers certainly helped them out recently. The third one, this is the one where we felt was more, we'll get into a little bit more as to why, but the growth factor. So what we did is we looked over several years and we averaged what our growth has been. And we fell just second from the top, with Grimes coming in first place. Of course, you can see the average off to the right. Are there any questions about any of this information so far?
Is the growth population or valuation, or which? Or what?
It's the growth of valuation.
Okay, thanks. I probably missed that.
So to go through these in a little bit more detail now, the first one is population. And on the left-hand side, you can see where that top number of 11,000, we split them up into a range. So the difference between the first range and the second is 100 or 100%. So double that amount, and then it declines for each category until we get to the top. Essentially, we started out with the lowest and then picked out that highest number, and that's how we came up with those ranges. Well, the big question of why that negative 10%, why that minus 3%, what do those mean? What we're trying to show here is that, so there's an average number in the middle, which we're going to say is roughly in that, putting Walkie and Johnson in that average. We tried to think, what is going to affect somebody's decision to move employment? So we roughly thought about $100,000 a year employee. And if they're going to receive a 10% increase, $10,000 to take a job in another location, that's probably compelling enough to cause that person to change their mind. So we use that 10% as either end, realizing that somebody in that at a smaller community may want to move up to that middle size or that average size community, and then from there up to a larger community. Tends to be a natural progression. Now is the point where elected officials really need to focus, because that minus 10%, minus 3%, the 3+ and 10+, those are the numbers that you can say, we'll adjust that. Maybe we want to see that at a higher percent or a lower percent. We can easily make those adjustments. We're giving you our rationale and justification. So the next one is taxable valuation, using that same criteria. This is where Norwalk falls in the lowest category. So the concept here, if we were just using taxable valuation, we might say, okay, we'll take the average compensation for all these communities, and to get our max wage, we're going to subtract 10% if we used just valuation. Going back to population, if we use just population, we would subtract 3% from that average. So the third one that we thought about was growth. This is where Norwalk, along with Waukee and Grimes, end up in that top category. Argument being, in a growing community, the issues that you deal with are different from some of those communities that have, I'm not going to say they've hit cruise control, but they're in a different mindset of growth than a community like us where we're growing so rapidly. All right, now for the spreadsheet.
They're not on cruise control, but I would argue that the very large cities are more of a corporate mindset where they are looking for efficiencies. I've worked for very, very, very large companies, and I've worked for small companies. The stress level in the larger companies, the highly politicized companies, there is an added stress level to it, period. I'm not sure how you include that. It's all in part of a decision making in taking a job or not, but.
Right. So what we have here, this is the Excel file that is really the kind of the nuts and bolts or the guts behind what we will end up as a recommendation for our wage ranges. And I think later, Carrie, you're going to get into more of the outcomes of this, of what we'll be looking for council to adopt in the future. So what you're seeing here are all the different positions. They're labeled on the left-hand side, each department. The intention is to not have you look individually at the numbers, but again, think about the methodology of how we're coming up with those numbers. A couple things I'm going to point out here. Number one, anything that you see that's highlighted in blue is a contract employee, which means there is a contract signed between the employee and council outlining what their wages are. Fire department, police department, public works are all union employees. City manager is a contract employee. You'll also notice there's a number of little purple comments indicating that there's some additional information behind the scenes on that particular number. We also have some areas that are grayed out where if it's grayed out and there's also a little purple note, it means there's some additional research to be done to make sure we have all the appropriate information. At the top also is just the population and valuation that we talked about before. So as you move right, at the top here in pink, this is showing the Norwalk max compared to the average and where we fall within that range. Anywhere where you see something that's highlighted in more of a green or a go shade would indicate that we are in line with that average, or maybe we're a little bit higher than what the average is. I would say most notably in some of those positions, those have been newer positions, or we've had a chance to update those wage ranges with council. The inverse, if you see more of the red or yellows, those that have, maybe those people have been in those positions longer, we haven't done any updates. So from there, this blue column is showing the population factor. And essentially what it does is it takes 3% off of whatever the average is, plugs in that number for each category. The next one is taxable valuation. That one removes 10%. So when we first did this, this stopped right here at a blended of minus 6.5%. We felt, okay, that's the number that would ultimately be our max wage range. Until we realized that the growth factor is also worth consideration. Brian, you brought up a good point about in those larger organizations, there's a different type of, I'll call it maybe political stress that somebody might think about. When we talked about growth as a factor, we are rapidly in need of additional staff to manage call volume, whether it's fire, EMS, PD, public works, seeing massive amounts of new roads, water and sewer to maintain. Where in some of those communities that are growing at a slower percent, they're not seeing as much of a gap to fill each year. So that's more behind our reasoning for bringing in the growth factor. So if you add 10% then to each one of those, that shows in each one of these down below in that column. And then we used a blended for all. And when you average across population, taxable value, and the growth factor, it shows that Norwalk should be about 1% under the average. That makes sense? The results of that show up over here in gray. So what this would provide us in the future would be a document to be adopted by council. Again, Carrie's, I think, going to touch on this a little bit more. But the results for us show that proposed max scale on the far right. And then what we do is for our mid-range and starting, for mid-range, we subtract 10%. And then for starting range, we're at 75% of whatever that max is. This is what we use in our performance matrix that we do with our staff each year that then determine what those wage adjustments are going to be. Are there any questions on these, the formulas or what we're showing in the Excel file?
So you're kind of thinking in terms of a set formula that maybe could be used consistently over time. The variables on that, then if I'm tracking with you, that may change from time to time, might be those percentages. As different communities grow or whatever, you know, the changes that happen.
Right.
And so that finds a solution for trying to bridge that gap between they don't look like us, but they steal our people. Right. That's been a continuous problem in public service for 40 years that I know of.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And what I think the survey results really showed us is that benefits is not why you're losing employees. Benefits is not the issue other than parental leave, right? Parental leave came up time and time again, that was something that people wanted to see. But otherwise, when people said maybe that there were benefits they didn't love as much, when we compared apples to apples, and I really looked at, I mean, I was able to get lots of great information from all these other cities. Our benefits were not that much different across the board, with the exception really that I've talked to Carrie about a lot of the parental leave. That was a different difference that we saw. But otherwise, people were saying that the reason that they were potentially going to leave was the compensation. So that's why we spent so much time on this, figuring out if they're going to go somewhere, they're probably going to go somewhere that's within driving distance and so close. So how can we make sure that we have Norwalk be competitive, but also in a way that makes sense and is scalable and objective, so that we can take some of the subjectivity out of it. So we really looked at the position and not the person. It was really what across the board is the position paying in all of these different marketplaces, not the person.
And so all the numbers we saw in that chart were the top for that pay.
Yes. And so that was regardless of education, tenure,
Right.
anything. So we figured that if you look at it that way, it's essentially what's your max out of pocket, right? What is it's kind of, if you look at it as an insurance, right? What would be the most you would pay for that position? And so if we compare just maxes, it takes all the other things that we maybe can't measure or monitor because we don't have that information in place.
How do you look at fringe benefits and value fringe benefits? How does that work in your study?
Yeah, so the survey had anything from, how do you feel about some of the 401k to, or how do you feel about even like the annual lunch that you guys have here, right, in Norwalk? So it asked about some of those things that I would say are fringe benefits, but maybe aren't necessarily tangible. And we received a lot of information about what people think of the annual lunch. So people were very responsive and were very willing to give feedback. So I was able to share that. Yes, we like the lunch. Maybe we don't like the awards part of it. So we had conversations about that. But great feedback on even those fringe benefits. So how do we use what's working and maybe go away with what's not working? So
Did
that'll
those
be my monitor.
dollar amounts for the wages, did that include the benefits, or is that the wage only,
That's wage
salary
only.
only?
Just the top salary.
So it really doesn't show the whole picture. You said they're similar for the others, but obviously as a percentage, as far as like comparing to West Des Moines or Windsor Heights or whoever.
So, but what we did is we compared apples to apples. So these are the max compensation ranges for each of these
Okay.
positions.
Not
Just
including
like,
benefits.
right. And then that
Okay.
was a separate comparison on the benefit side. And really on the benefit side, we are much more in alignment. And so there's a lot more similarities than not in that, on that side.
So one of the next key things to note, and Carrie, again, I think she's going to touch on this. So where the real complexity comes in is not really even establishing these wage ranges. If council agrees fundamentally that this methodology makes sense, we get those wage ranges set. She's going to talk a little bit about then how do we place our specific employees within those ranges.
Right, so the methodology discussed just provides the foundation for adjusting the wages to ensure that Norwalk is competitive, yet also recognizing that we can't be equal in compensation. Sort of the next steps where we go from here is I plan to bring a resolution to the next council meeting, May 5th, asking council to approve an updated salary matrix. So that's setting those wage ranges for each position. And then once the salary matrix is updated and approved by council, then I can visit with each of the department heads to review each of their staff members. And we're going to take a look at factors like experience, performance, education level to then place those individuals in the wage range. So we want to make sure that we use justifiable criteria. We want to take subjectivity out of it as much as possible. That protects the city, but then it's just the most fair thing to do as well. In addition, we also have to make sure that the wage changes work within the confines of our budget. And this might mean that we can't make all the changes this July. It might take more than 1 year to make the updates that we want to make. And then as a general practice, I will submit a resolution to approve those final fiscal year 23 wages for staff members prior to July 1. That's kind of where we go from there. What other questions or feedback do you have specifically on that methodology? I want to make sure that we're doing what council wants us to do.
I was curious about the effect on the budget, what that would do to the levy rates and all of that with what you're planning. I think that's very important.
It's a great question. A part of our early analysis, we've done a little testing. There's a lot of guesswork involved in that until Carrie has a chance to meet with each department head and go through specifically where the staff would end up. I will tell you that right now, we anticipate that we would likely only be able to accommodate about 50% of those wage adjustments for fiscal year 23. We did anticipate some increases in wages. So Jean did put some of that in the budget already. It's just a little bit further beyond that. So we're anticipating this would likely happen in 2 different phases, either over 2 different fiscal years or maybe a July 1st, January 1st, so that we can get our staff where they need to be as quickly as possible, but also make it work in the budget.
What if the algorithm is such with this? I'm very much worried about the increase in interest rates on mortgages. I think we'll see a real hold on some home building. What would happen if the growth rate decreases or does not increase at the current rate? How would that algorithm, it's not like you can cut people's salaries. How is that going to be factored into these algorithms?
Our growth in the future is a tremendous factor when we determine what we're going to do for our base wage adjustment each year. So each year when we do our budget planning, council will be making a decision, what is that base wage adjustment in the future? So what we're doing right now is we're actually looking at fiscal year 22 numbers. So by the time this is adopted and implemented, it's 1 year old. That's just a function of how long it takes sometimes to make these
Right.
things. So that is an advantage to us in terms of finances. So then they're moving into the future each year. If we decide that our growth slows down, what that means then is your base wage adjustments that you adopt as council are going to be a lower number, possibly flat.
Well, the other thing I think this approach does is you're setting a wage range. You're not setting an actual wage. So where we set the wage each year, right, will be reflected by this study. But it's also reflected in the budget and, what can be done, fiscally, right, from year to year. So this by itself doesn't commit to a specific wage for a specific person, right? This puts value to a category for a particular job. The other point with this is that this will not affect contract employees. That's a whole separate game. So this really only applies to non-contract employees, correct? It may guide the discussions on contracts in the future and things like that, right?
Will this affect union members?
No,
That's what Ed is referring to as the contract.
Right, that's what I was wondering. Okay, all right, thanks, Ed.
but it may guide that, right? Because we'll have the information laying out there for both sides to see, right? So it's probably a fair deal, right? But, as far as immediate impact, it'll be for non-union employees. And it just sets the line. It doesn't set the wage. That's a totally separate conversation that's yet to be had, right?
Mhm.
So, okay. But I understand Baker's concerns. With an economy, we don't know, Federal Reserve Bank, all the other stuff going on in the world. We need to be considerate of that as we move forward with things. Granted, it takes a couple of years to show up here usually, but, gotta watch it.
Questions or thoughts, concerns?
No, I appreciate the presentation. I like the study. I wish we'd have thought of that 40 years ago. I like it.
It has been great working with Meredith and 6585. She's been valuable, and big thanks to you for taking on the numbers. I am not a numbers person, so I'm super glad to have him on board with that. So if that's all, then I'll take a seat and we can move forward. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
It's just that I will comment, it is so difficult to try to compare such a smaller organization with the Ankeny's, West Des Moines, Clives.
Yeah.
It's like comparing Hopkins Sporting Goods or a small place against a Walmart. There's so many ways that the individuals are much more important to the small place. They always know where they stand. But the large places, they literally come in and, oh, by the way, 30 of you are unemployed at the end of the month. We know what we have, and it is such a better atmosphere than that. I wish we could get more representation from like size, whether it's people that move there or not. I understand our people go to West Des Moines, our people go to Ankeny, but it's hard to say that being a fireman in Ankeny or Des Moines is better than being a fireman or a policeman here. Or, like I said, in Des Moines. There's a different level of stress. There's a different everything, whole different feel. If you're in West Des Moines, you don't see the city manager very often personally. You will go through 3 levels of supervisors. before anything gets to the city manager.
Could be good, could be bad.
It can be good or bad. That's exactly right.
But to your question earlier, that is where culture makes the difference, because that's gonna be why people either stay or go. And so if we can at least say, okay, then we have to make sure that culture piece, which is the people part, stays in an environment where people want to be here. That part is going to be so important, is making sure we're taking care of our people, and compensation's just a spoke of that wheel.
And I agree, efficiency needs to be there, and that is part of the corporate culture. We need to make sure that efficiency is a major portion of what we do going forward, and people will be held accountable. If you pay a great wage, then you'll be held more accountable.
Good point.
I think that's good.
And I think the other point is, if you can be in the ballpark, you know, as long as you can be in the ballpark, there are other things that you can offer in an organization or such.
Yeah, in HR, we always look at what is the max, what is the min, and what is, you know, what is the low. Low, mid, and high is what sets it. And so using all of the cities and comparing all the maxes, that way we can make sure that City of Norwalk is still being as competitive as possible, using that kind of criteria that all the HR departments are going to be using.
So
Okay, thank you.
final note that I'll pass along is that if ultimately council takes action to say, yes, we agree with this methodology, our wages would be 1% below the average of all those communities.
Interesting.
But that's a decision we make later. That's not the action. We're not taking any action today.
Right.
Today's just the discussion and the education about what we did and what we know.
Excellent.
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, we are up to number 6 on the agenda. Welcome of guests and public comment. If you would like to speak to a non-agenda item, now would be the time to do so. You have a 3-minute time limit. We cannot take any action on these items tonight since they aren't on the agenda. If you'd like to comment on any item in the consent agenda, now would also be the time to do that. So I see we have somebody. State your name, please, and your address.
At 1736 Bristol. And I'm here, my annual visit, to invite you and thank you for your participation in Norwalk Hometown Pride. And always to thank the police department for making that such an outstanding event. This will be our 5th summer, which is really pretty amazing to me. We started with 85 homes that hosted the first year, and we're probably averaging 45 or 50 each year since then. So that's close to 300 different events that have happened. So again, 5th summer, I put a little flyer. We start June 8th, July 13th, and August 10th. These are all Wednesday nights because that's the night that works best for the officers in the police department. We really have a need to reach all the new families that have moved into town and don't have a clue what Front Porch Norwalk is. So anything you can do to tell them about it, invite them, we'll really appreciate that. We're going to hope to work with some realtors and some other things just to get the word out, because there's 11 new families on my 2-block street. I don't even know them. So how do we reach them and explain what this is? We do look forward, and I know people who come really look forward to seeing all of you and to seeing the officers. I had a member of the community yesterday tell me they got it as a public safety event. They finally understand that's one of the reasons that we do it. So June 8th, we hope to see you. Last year, for the first time, we had members of the fire department come. People love that. So again, we're hoping to talk to
Yeah, people like those firemen.
Chief Porter today. Yeah, they do. Yeah, that, and when the chief laid on the ground and let us draw an outline of, the crime victim, I still have the photos.
That's always a showstopper.
Yeah, so thank you all. We hope to see you. I think it's 49 days away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing nobody, we'll move on to number 7, proclamations. So the first proclamation is Professional Municipal Clerks Week. May 1 through 7, 2022. Our clerk is Lindsay. She's one of the best around. She isn't here because she is at the Warren County Leadership Academy tonight. And then the second proclamation is Public Service Week, May 1 through 7 of 2022. I need to do anything else for that? Okay, so then we are going to move on to the consent agenda. April 7, 22 minutes of the regular city council meeting. B, expenditures, C, tax abatements, D, special event application for Run Norwalk 5K, May 7th, 2022. Resolution approving City of Norwalk electronic signature policy. Resolution approving pay estimate number 5 to SM Hedges and Sons, sorry if I butchered that, Incorporated for the Northwest Service Area Trunk Sewer Extension Project. Resolution approving amended agreement with Stratus Building Solutions for janitorial services. Resolution approving assignment of development agreement among the City of Norwalk, Sportsplex USA, LC, Heartland Sports Properties, LLC, and Fortress Bank. I, resolution approving 28 agreement with Warren County Fire and EMS Association for mutual aid assistance. Resolution approving the Bishop Engineering Civil Site Work Agreement for Norwalk Central. Resolution setting May 5, 2022 for a public hearing regarding a zoning amendment to change land west of Shadow Creek Estates, south of Beardsley Street from AR Agricultural Reserve to the Hackney Hills Plan Development Unit Development. Resolution setting May 5, 2022 for a public hearing regarding a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use of approximately 10 acres of land west of Shadow Creek Estates, south of Beardsley Street, from medium density residential to high density residential. Resolution setting May 19, 2022 for a public hearing to amend the City of Norwalk Code of Ordinances by adding and enacting thereto a new section to Chapter 107 to establish a benefited stormwater drainage district and to adopt connection fees therein. Resolution ordering construction of certain public improvements, Colonial Parkway Regional Stormwater Detention Facility Project, approving preliminary plans and fixing a date for hearing thereon and taking a bid of bids thereof. Resolution authorizing the City of Norwalk, Iowa to accept Warren County Philanthropic Partnership Community Grant Funds for the partial funding of forcible entry training door prop, correspondence, and monthly reports.
Motion.
Second. I'll second. So,
You can do
motion
that.
by Cool, second by Livingston. Caleb, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes. Okay, so that passes and we move on to number 9, old and new business for consideration, discussion, and possible action. So the first thing we have is public hearing regarding a zoning amendment to change land west of Shadow Creek Estates, south of Beardsley from AR Agricultural Reserve to the Hackney Hills Planned Unit Development. So this is still pending with P and Z, correct? This is the one that
Correct.
P and Z tabled.
Table, yes. Correct.
So we're gonna open up the public hearing at 7:09. And our Planning and Zoning Commission tabled this item during their meeting, so we don't have anything to present for this public hearing tonight. We will have another public hearing, as we indicated in the consent agenda, at the May 5th meeting. So no comments. We're gonna close the public hearing at 7:09:30. All right, B is a public hearing regarding comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use of approximately 10 acres of approximately 10 acres of land west of Shadow Creek Estates, south of Beardsley Street, from medium density residential to high density residential. This is also still pending with P and Z, so we'll open this at this public hearing at 7:10. This too has been tabled by Planning and Zoning, so we don't have anything to present, and we will have the another public hearing on May 5th. So with that, I will close this public hearing at 7, 10, and 15 seconds. All right, then D, a resolution approving the purchase of a command vehicle. So we've hired a fire inspector. That's why you're still here. Who we got to meet tonight. And Jeremy's going to need a vehicle to get to the inspection sites. So it seems like a good idea to add the equipment and make it an additional command vehicle. As we grow, we may have more than one incident going, and having the additional command vehicle will be helpful. So Chief Porter, I'll let you take it from here if there's anything else.
Thank you. The only thing else besides what was in the agenda statement was that I just wanted to bring attention to, I was promoted in October. I was promoted on a Monday and CIP was due on Friday. And so I had little time to kind of plan what was going to go into my CIP for fiscal year 23. We had identified some critical items that took a higher precedence to the command vehicle, which is why I pushed that off to fiscal year 24. But now with the hiring of the inspector, we kind of have a need for that sooner than fiscal year 24. We're hoping to use the proceeds from the engine that you approved the sale of last council meeting for the purchase, so the cost would not come out of reserves.
Okay, so before we have any discussion on that, I made a mistake and I skipped C. So can we finish with this one?
Yeah, we can finish this one.
Okay, and then we'll go back to C. Okay, so any discussion, comments, anything for Chief Porter or about the purchase of a command vehicle?
Seems kind of like a weak excuse for getting promoted one day.
A valid
I
excuse
think,
yet.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good use of funding. Yes, ma'am, it is now.
So motion by Cool,
Second.
second by Baker. Any further discussion? All right, Kayla, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Cool,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Okay, so now we're going to go back to C. Again, I apologize. This is a resolution approving the 28 agreement with the city of West Des Moines regarding the reconstruction of County Line Road from 50th Avenue to Veterans Parkway. So we need to have this 28 agreement to cover the rebuilding of that road. It looks pretty straightforward, but Wayne, what do you have to say?
I have nothing to add. Any questions? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, like you mentioned. Be happy to.
So they're gonna.
I've got,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I've got two things on this one. One of them is the statement that says that Norwalk will pay for that expansion. And I'm struggling with how we can commit future councils to agree to pay for something that that statement, I know that's the intent, but that statement bothers me from that standpoint. I mean, if West Des Moines does something that requires a third lane on that road, why are we gonna we have to pay for it because we agreed to it tonight?
The third lane would be on the south side. It would be entirely in Norwalk's jurisdiction.
I understand that, but if they're doing something that requires the third lane, that doesn't mean that we have to pay for it. That's where I'm saying today, I disagree with that line that says that Norwalk will pay for it. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts in there. It's Norwalk will pay for it. And I don't know, two things. I don't know how that could be enforceable on a future council. But secondly, I don't know that I'm comfortable saying that in the 2080.
I think the purpose of that was more, and the purpose of that part of that agreement was more to clarify that West Des Moines is not expected to pay for any other expansion on it. That would be solely within the city, and it'd be within the city's discretion on whether and when it was built. So I think.
But there's no timetable on it, Jim. I mean, it's just kind of a set long-term thing, and that's mine. Is I don't know that I agree with that.
Well, wasn't the reading I took from it, unless I'm reading it wrong, was that future council, if they desired to add another lane to it, that future council would pay for it, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like we do any other project. The question, though, that Dave brings up, that's a good one, right? Is what's the estimated trafficability on that street? And I would imagine that they've studied this if they're designing it. that we should be able to access their information, right? To understand the adequacy of the street for their projected traffic count.
And Ed, they haven't been straightforward with us on this project from day one. West Des Moines had said they hadn't done any engineering on this project. Then all of a sudden, in 2 days, we had engineering reports in front of us here at Norwalk because we found out they had already done it. So I'm struggling with them. Say if we ask them for traffic reports, I don't think we would necessarily get them because I don't feel that they've been very cooperative or very straightforward on this project at all.
I have,
Is that what the
that's a
staff
question.
has
I haven't
found?
seen any of the design information come through, but I'm confident to say it's not gonna be. They wouldn't be accommodating less traffic than Adams would have been able to convey through there. The purpose of County Line Road is to replace Adams. I'm confident they would have designed it to handle that traffic loading, but again, I haven't seen it.
You mean Moffett,
Or
that Moffett Lake Road?
Yeah,
They got closed.
the one they're closing, this is the new route.
Right.
That's how they would have designed it.
And David, I just wanted, I apologize if there's anything we as staff have done to give you that impression. My opinion is that West Des Moines has been great partners to work with on the project. I feel like they have been responsive when we needed items. Actually, the only thing that took a while was getting this 28E pulled together. But other than that, they have been pretty responsive. We did discuss this at other council meetings in the past. We came up with a list of items that were requirements from the city. Items such as the trail, the requirement that the city of Norwalk would not participate in any portion of this upgrade today because it was being prompted by West Des Moines. And there was a host of other requirements. And they agreed to those at that time, and they've since added it to their plan. I think there was also a requirement they had to move power lines north so that the right-of-way didn't get extended towards current residential properties in Norwalk. They also worked to accommodate that. So again, if you have that perspective, I certainly, my aim is not to change that. I'm just giving my perspective is that they have been good to work with.
And I don't disagree that once we brought it to their attention that they started helping and doing, actually providing documents to us. But they hid this project from us for months and then acted all dumb. I mean, I brought this to you and you went to them and they acted like they hadn't done anything about it and hadn't heard anything. They acted like they didn't know anything about it. And then all of a sudden they had engineered reports and all this other stuff a week later. It just, that doesn't sit well with me when they start the project out that way. But then, but on the flip side, I still get back to all such future lane expansion shall be at Norwalk's expense. It doesn't say if it's in the city of Norwalk. It could be that it's in West Des Moines. So then is that ours? Based on that one line? That line really bothers me. And it's just the way it's so, it's so forward.
We could probably amend it, David, to accommodate you, but also though, all such future lane expansion is referring to the previous sentence that talks about the roadways designed to accommodate a future lane expansion on the southern half of the right of way. So it's not any expansion of the road, it's the
such expansion.
yes, the
That's
southern half
referred
of the
to.
right of way within
Right.
the city of Norwalk. So, you know, the worry of it being possibly outside the city of Norwalk or someplace else on the, it's not, it's very specific on what we're talking about. Now, that being said, I don't know what the status of West Des Moines' approval of this, but if we wanted to amend that line, we could certainly put something like all such future lane expansion. Or this agreement does not require the city of West Des Moines to pay for all such future lane expansion. So I think that's really the purpose of this, was to clarify that, you know, the future, West Des Moines building this part of the road for us within our jurisdiction, but they're not agreeing to build any other road.
Yeah, too bad. That would have been nice.
Yeah.
And Jim, I like that the way you said that better than Norwalk will pay for it. I'd rather say that I don't know. I just struggle with that. Yeah, even with the all such, I don't like the terminology there because if West Des Moines puts something, if they put an apartment complex in on the north side of that road, I know they probably won't, but if they did, that's going to increase the traffic count on that road. So all of a sudden, that road needs a third lane, is it our responsibility because they put something in?
I don't feel that way, but I think we can certainly do the amendment like we talked about. So it certainly does clarify it. And if everyone, I think it's a good clarification. So I think we can put it in there, David.
Well, and then I've got one more because I wasn't real satisfied with one more piece. And I feel like they're going to be closing 50th. They're going to be closing County Line Road at some point. And I want to ensure that our residents have access to and from their property, and that our fire and police department have access to and from those properties all throughout construction. And I don't feel like this 28E covers that at all.
You want to try to add a line in there that addresses that, or a paragraph that addresses that?
I mean, I would tell you that you could add an F that says when County Line Road is closed, access will be available for all landowners and homeowners. However, whatever terminology you need there, along with all emergency personnel from Norwalk. I mean, I just don't, I'm not comfortable saying, because from what I've been hearing is that, and what West Des Moines has on their website is essentially they're going to close 50th. And they're displacing our residents and telling them they aren't going to be able to use their road. So it's not their residents they're displacing, it's our residents. And that's the part that bothers me, is that they don't.
When I met with them early on, right, and they were very cooperative, and they indicated that the plan was to put that bike path in first. And the bike path would be the means of travel for the people that live in that area. It'd be like narrow paved road. So maybe we put a line or a paragraph in there that addresses that. That they'll ensure that they have a means of egress, right, Jim?
I mean, we can certainly add that to it. I think, if we want to do that, I think we can add that. I think we should probably table the agreement then, because I don't know.
Have to work on a little bit more.
I didn't have any problem with unilaterally just changing the one regarding the future expansion, because I think we were just further clarifying what everybody understood, what the intention was. But I think we're going to add additional details regarding accommodating access and.
Would it be better to have some kind of an MOU with them maybe that addresses the construction period?
So just of note, that 50th is already closed.
Yeah, it's been closed for a while.
Yeah. I guess I'm not fully understanding. And the area of 50th that they've closed is not our residents, and there aren't any residents there.
I'm talking about County Line Road.
I think his concern is once they tear County Line Road up, how are they going to get in? And my understanding from talking to West Des Moines early on is that they're building that bike path along the north side first.
They are.
And the reason
see
for
that.
finishing that was that'll be the egress for all those residents to use while that road's torn up.
Right, they would park off site
Right.
and they have access that way.
And what David, I think, is saying is that he'd feel better if we had that in writing someplace. So I wonder if it wouldn't be better just to sit down and administratively do an MOU with West Des Moines, memorandum of understanding, that this is how that'll proceed. We wouldn't have to necessarily have it voted on agreement.
And I'm not saying I want them to have to park and walk. I'm saying that they should have access to their properties.
No, they wouldn't have.
I
to
think-
walk the block. They'll drive in and out.
No,
Their driveways are gonna connect with bike paths
no, they're not.
temporarily.
I don't, that seems, well,
Well, that was. the way they-
apparently we need to get a better understanding, because as I look at the structure of what they're doing now,
Uh-huh.
you don't construct a bike path for vehicle access. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Plus,
Well-
I don't know.
Depends on how you construct it, but that was how they explained it to me.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the plans right now and they're showing a temporary roadway surface on the north side for
Right.
all phases of the project. Going all the way from Soteria.
Yep.
Yep.
So it's already in their plan.
Yeah, it connects over to our road, so they'd be able to get out temporary surfacing to Norwalk. And conversely, our emergency services would be able to get in.
That's the exact same thing they've done on the side of Fluor Drive for all of those residences.
Right.
Yeah.
A temporary gravel road.
Right.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah, and I think because it's, I don't know, from my perspective, because it's in their plan, I don't feel like we need a special language in
No,
our agreement or anything else. I'm satisfied with, I'm satisfied with that issue.
I am too.
Well, and they're gonna pave that roadway or grade it anyway, so that if a future council wants to add that lane, it's crap.
Right, right. And that's
in the
what B
agreement.
says.
So I mean, that's quite a bit of the expense, actually. So I don't think they're treating us bad.
No, I don't either. And I have not, I mean, I can't speak to David's experience. I haven't had that experience. I think they've been very responsive to us, provided us with information.
They have been with me.
So, yeah.
Okay, I guess the way that I look at it is if West Des Moines hasn't approved it yet, or even if, you know,
They have not.
if we unilaterally, what's that?
They have not approved
They
it.
have not. I think the lane change thing, we could certainly, as far as paying for it, I think we could certainly change that wording. They wouldn't object to it, because we're not really changing anything. So if we wanted to vote on that and change the resolution, or change the agreement with regards to that, including that part in it, I think we could probably get away with that without, you know, ruffling feathers or having to go back for negotiations. I think the other aspect of it, if we want to unilaterally throw something in there regarding access and every, you know, items like that, then I think we should probably table it and give us an opportunity to talk to West Des Moines.
I don't think we need to do that.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it says the roadway is designed to accommodate a future lane expansion. It doesn't say I mean, if council decides it's not needed, it's not needed. I think it's fine the way it is.
And it talks specifically about the southern half of the right of way, which is ours. And I mean,
Yes.
we have the option to not do it. So, yeah, I'm fine with the way it is. I'm fine moving forward. So
Okay,
is there more discussion?
I'll make the motion then.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Cool, second by Baker. Kayla, would you call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Kayla,
Not
would you call the
now.
roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Cool,
Yeah,
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
No.
All right, so that action passes. Okay, so now if I'm right, we're up to E. Resolution expressing intent to provide economic development support to Huseman Construction LLC. So in summary, I'll just say that we're as close as we've been to this closing on the hotel site. The Husemans have some timing needs, and to get financing started, they need some assurance from the city that we're committed to providing economic support for the development. Holly, I'll let you go from there.
And we do have the Husemans here, Huseman, I'm so sorry. I think I've heard Ryan say Huseman and Greg say, no, I'm just kidding. So the family, they are here, Carol, Greg, and Ryan. And I'll just start off by saying they've been amazing to work with. I've known you guys for a long time, since back in the Carlisle days. We're super happy to have them here in Norwalk. They've been incredibly patient. Not the easiest development area to be working in, but they have really held it together fabulously. So anyway, so we are here, and I know part of there, and you guys are welcome to speak to this too, but part of the timing issue is they are submitting a franchise agreement to the hotel flag that they're working with right now, and they have to have that submitted by the flag's board meeting the first week of May. In order to do that, they have to have everything in that application, including whatever incentives may be coming from the city and what our development agreement terms are. So with that, that's why we had to kind of get this a little bit time sensitive moving forward here. We know that the process, eventually when we approve all of the agreements, we will have to amend our urban renewal area, and that's kind of a little bit of a timely process, and that normally goes first, and that's why we're doing this intent resolution for them so they can try to get that application in on time and make this work. Otherwise, it could push the project out until next year. And at that point, with the craziness of the world, it's pretty much, we have no guarantee that a hotel would happen at that point. So did I cover that pretty well?
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so any discussion or comments from council or public comment?
I just want to say I appreciate this family's perseverance.
Over 2 years ago.
All right, can I get a motion to approve? Motion from Cool, second. Livingston.
Baker, second.
Sorry, too slow. Okay, and any further discussion? All right, Kayla, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, that resolution passes. Now we move to F, resolution expressing intent to provide economic development support for Norwalk Hotel Associates LLC. This is a similar item as item E. Another item that the Hughesmans need to take to get this project off the ground. So Holly, anything else?
I would just say, just for clarification, we have 2 different development agreements with this group because the Hughesmans are purchasing the ground that the hotel will develop on, and then they have a group that will own the hotel and build the hotel. So that's why there's 2 separate development agreements, but same timing with this flag application.
Okay, great. Any discussion or comments from council or any public comment? Okay, hearing none.
I'd make a motion.
Motion from
I'll
Baker,
second Baker's motion.
second Cool. Any further discussion? All right, Kayla, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes. All right, that resolution passes. So item number 10, council inquiries and staff updates. Luke Nelson, you are first.
Yeah, I just have a couple items. First, the airport authority invited city managers back to give an update of what's going on. Kind of the key part of that update is they're progressing. It's cold in here. However, the dollars that they had hoped for from the governor's office didn't come through in the full amount that they originally requested. However, there is a component of ARPA funds through the federal government. There's some competitive dollars that Kevin Foley felt pretty positive that they could apply and go after those dollars to help make up the gap. So kind of some good and bad there, but overall, I think they're still heading in a good direction. Also, last item, just letting all the council members know, we shared a lot of detail about that wage study. And if you have any individual questions, you want to dive into some of those details, please feel free to reach out.
All right, thanks, Brian.
I have nothing.
Kaylin. Robin.
Just wanted to let everyone know that our Earth Day, Arbor Day event for tomorrow has been rescheduled. It sounds kind of strange, but the ground is actually too wet for us to get heavy equipment on. It just caused more damage to the park than help it. And so it is now scheduled for next Wednesday, April 27th from 1 to 5. Michael Foods still is going to come out and help us to clean up Elizabeth Holland, help us plant some trees, and City State Bank is also going to help with that event. We still need lots of volunteers to help plant over 70 trees at Pine Needle. So if anybody wants to help plant trees next Wednesday, get a hold of the Parks Department. And then we are also still in need of hiring lifeguards and swim instructors. So if you know of any kids or even adults that have certification, are interested in getting certified, again, send them our way. That's it.
All right, thank you, Holly. I'm sorry, Jean Strable.
That's
Yep.
okay. I just wanted to mention, I did distribute the May calendar of events, and just a reminder, we do have a used book sale sponsored by our Library Foundation as a fundraiser. It'll be May 9th through 12th. We're accepting donations if you have some, but we'd really like for you to come and buy them and take them home to your home libraries. And I'd also like to give a shout out for a special program we have on Saturday, May 7th for all ages. It is in celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Month, and we're going to have someone who's coming to demonstrate and teach the use of various Japanese instruments. And my favorite is the big taiko drum. So we will be testing out the disturbing the peace ordinance, I think, because it's pretty loud. So please join us for that.
Just don't do it before 7.
It will not happen. Thank you. And that's it.
All right, thank you, Jean. Now,
Okay, so you probably saw the construction equipment out at the site, Norwalk Central, so the grading has begun. That was the big one we were waiting to get to, because now it'll go pretty quickly getting the infrastructure in and then the physical structures. We started receiving our 3D renderings. The whole area, Norwalk Central, looks amazing. So we'll get some of those images out. We get them kind of updated tomorrow. The official groundbreaking invite, I think, will go out tomorrow. Shelby will be sending that out, and we'll have the press release out as well, because the groundbreaking is officially on May 12th. So I know we had talked about the 5th, but May 12th, because that's when Iowa Economic Development Authority Director Durham can be there. And she really wanted to be there, and she is leaving a meeting with the Prime Minister to fly down here to be at our groundbreaking. So it's, I give her lots of credit for that. So it'll be at the site by Mahalo's at 3 o'clock, and then afterwards we'll have kind of an after party celebration. We're thinking right now it'll be at the Mercantile. It's the 12th, Brian.
Brian, you're not whispering.
Sorry.
That was kind of freaky, Brian.
What day is the 12th? That's what I asked. Sorry. Thank you.
No council meeting that day. So, and then other than that, we really have a lot of new activity with new commercial developments coming up all along Highway 28. So that's pretty exciting. We can talk about those next time, but.
All right, thanks, Jean Kelly.
I'm just working on the budget amendment, and I have a couple things I wanted to talk about tonight. As far as fuel expenses are up, we're gonna go over for sure. They're up 40 to 45%. I was just gonna make that a part of the amendment instead of a separate item, if that's okay. And the tornado damage, we had about $190,000 that I have seen so far between Public Works, the Police Department and Parks. I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna amend the expenses on that side, but we will have a revenue coming in to offset. We will set the public hearing May 5th, and then we'll have the public hearing on May 19th. For that amendment. So generally we bring things and amend them, prior, but these are things that just have kind of accumulated over time. So I will just make it part of that process. And that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Chief Staples.
Yesterday was the first MPD Life event for the year. We had 14 young adults come to the police department to play games. I can tell you that I came in 3rd out of 3 in Mario Karts. And I crashed a lot. So that went well. Last week, we had a assessment for sergeant candidates. That went very well. We have 3 candidates to choose from for 2 spots. And I hope to do a sergeant's promotion next week. And lastly, today, earlier this afternoon, I went to Officer Kennedy Williams Academy graduation. She did fantastic, and her first day on field training patrol will be Wednesday. So that's all I have.
Good, Chief Porter.
I want to thank council for the approval of the vehicle. I appreciate the support for that for us. You may have saw on consent agenda that we did, were awarded the philanthropic grant. I know other departments have gotten that, but that's a big deal for us. This is the first time that we in the fire department has gotten it. And this was all our staff. They researched it, they put it together, they submitted it. So it was pretty exciting to have that awarded. So lastly, we had Pancake Day on Saturday. This was our first one since COVID, like a traditional one. And we served 940 people.
Wow.
So I thought that was a huge turnout for the community. Thanks to city staff, council, and the community for supporting that.
Thank you. Wayne,
I have nothing tonight.
Tony, Blizzy, is he on? All right, Luke Paris.
Permit numbers for March came in at around 60 single family and townhome permits. So that puts us up to 107 total for the year for housing permits. In just total permits for March, we did 216. We're at 139 through April right now, and that's of all types of permits we issue. So lots of work going on the permitting front. Code enforcement, we're not quite to grass growing season, and the snow that we get seems to melt away quick. So not a lot of those normal nuisance complaints. So most of our stuff's been focused on trash and debris and some trees and some unsafe building type things. We rolled out our rehabilitation program for our LMI dollars. We have 5 applications that we're reviewing. So we've got a good subset of those, and we'll do our first initial eligibility check on those and then go forward with ones that are eligible and determine if their projects will work with the program. Comp plan goals review. We're currently in the process of reviewing our goals and strategies for the upcoming comprehensive plan. I've been meeting with different departments over this week to discuss all of them, because it's kind of, again, it's a comprehensive plan. So it comprehensively covers the city. So lots of good info from those departments. I thank them for spending some time with me on those. And then lastly, we're going to be looking to bringing forward a staff initiated zoning amendment related to swimming pools. Last year, we had 2 swimming pools get built with covers that met the code, the building code requirement that they didn't have to have a fence. And we just generally feel like that's still an issue, even though the code allows for if you buy this right cover, you cannot have a fence around your property. That's still concerning to us as a staff. So we are going to be proposing an easy, quick amendment to our swimming pool zoning regulations that will just require a non-climbable barrier around your pool area. So regardless of cover type.
Carrie.
Would that be retroactive or not?
Probably not. You can't
Okay.
not be.
I didn't think that would be possible. I just was curious. Thank you.
Yep.
Won't be able to use the neighbor's swimming pool anymore, will I?
Well, a couple too in town, please.
Ed, do you have anything?
Just a couple of things, ma'am. The waterworks board that I serve on, we were discussing and have a change of policy will come to the council probably in the not too distant future. One of the requirements that we have is in the waste water that comes from our users, and it has to meet certain state and federal standards. And so we'll be measuring that. And it really only applies to one user in our community. And potentially there could be increased fees depending on how that water measures. And so that'll come before us to take a look at and see, if we can get the council's approval there. They'll have an opportunity to mitigate it. It's all covered in the policy. And then the other thing is on the waste management committee, waste management board, we discussed it looks like the model bill, right, has undergone some major changes now. And so there's a desire by the grocers to approach this in a different way, right? It's possible that waste management could end up, that might be an area where we operate. We're looking at the possibility of putting drop-offs in each community that we might service for a recycle system. We don't know quite how that mechanism would work, right? But I'm sure we could figure it out. At any rate, we may see something in the future come toward us in regards to letting them try a drop off down here. Be very similar to the way they service our cardboard drop off that we've got. Those are the two things that I've got. And tomorrow I leave for Colorado, so I needed to stick around for tonight though, because I didn't know.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Jim?
I have nothing.
Okay. And I just want to say thanks for bearing with me as Mayor Pro Tem. And
I did a good job.
I have nothing else, so can I get a motion to adjourn? No?
Motion.
David, oh my gosh.
Oh, sorry, David.
So they took away my screen and now I don't see you. So
Sorry.
I blame Luke. David Lester?
I've got nothing. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
All right, motion second.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right, we are adjourned at 7:45.
I'm impressed.
Hung in there, are you waiting?
Well done.
You're saying I'm allowed to come back.
Do you know on the